Good morning, Ari Lev.
Good morning. Good morning. How you doing?
I'm good. Tuesday morning. No, Wednesday morning.
There you go.
Okay.
COVID times, my friend.
Yeah, but I'm getting better. At least I know the year, you know?
Right? It is 2021,
Yeah,
right?
it is. I've been writing like 2019. 2020 never, I don't think it really existed.
No, definitely not.
It didn't happen.
It really feels like, we're here in March 2021, and I'm just thinking to myself, like, it was just March 2020. How are we here again? How's it March again? Like Purim.
Right.
Where did that come from?
Right.
It was just last Purim.
Right.
And now here we are again.
Yeah.
Pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's really wild. I'm just really happy, at least at this point, we're a year later, and it seems like things are opening up.
Things are opening.
There's like some positivity in the air. There's some good vibes. Here in Israel, where the 5 millionth person was vaccinated, which was pretty cool. I think I heard the Prime Minister say that the other day. So that's really, really exciting. We were talking off air. I'll just get right into it. It's really exciting that, like, Efrat, a lot of Efratians have vaccinated, but they're now vaccinating the workers, the Poalim, the Palestinians who live in this neighboring village and the neighboring village next to us over there. These are the guys who come in for work every day. There's about 500 workers who come in every day.
Oh, I think at least, maybe even closer to the 700-800. I mean, we got a lot of projects going on. We got the mall, we've got the country club, right? Because we're fancy like that.
Right.
So we got our country club going on.
Of course.
And I think it's really cool because Efrat's actually one of the few places in the country that's actually doing this vaccination for the Palestinian workers that have work permits.
Right. And are the workers who come into Efrat, are they just construction workers? Are there other workers who come in? Maybe, like, I know for the Moetzah must employ a few workers for Shefa, for like the cleaning of the grounds and taking care of the municipal areas and stuff like that.
So we let in, let's see, we've got cleaners. Yeah. All the street cleaners are Palestinians that are let in. All the gardeners, pretty much. There's one family actually from Hebron. They've been doing the gardening here in Efrat for like 30 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And you know them, they know you, you're wishing each other good morning and everything like that.
Sure.
And I actually had an interesting story happen with that. Okay. So, as you may know, I'm on the Efrat, emergency response team. So, I'm always on alert.
Kitat Konenut,
Kitat Konenut, absolutely. And so I'm out just walking around the neighborhood and I see this guy and he's an unfamiliar face because you know who's walking around your neighborhood.
Sure.
So I look at this dude, and I'm like, okay, I see him once, my Spidey signal's going off.
Okay.
But I'm like, you know what? I saw him once. He's probably legit. A little bit later, like, I don't know, like an hour later, he's just like walking by my house, and he's like looking around, and I'm like...
He's not doing anything.
No, he's just like kind of walking around. Like, this dude's supposed to be gardening.
Yeah.
The guy gardened. He's supposed to be cleaning, let him clean, but he's not doing any of that.
Right.
So finally, I'm like, okay, all right. I'm going over to this dude. What's this going on? Yeah. So I went over and I identified myself, showed him my ID, and I'm like, I'd like to see you chew that zoo, please. And so he decides he's not going to give it to me. So at this point, of course, I get, I call up the bitachon and we get everybody involved. In the end, the guy was totally, clean, cool, and everything like that. But I know I'd always rather be safe than sorry.
Right.
That's kind of how I see it.
Right. Well, I love that. That sounds great, especially coming from someone who's like one of the, in the first response squad, there to protect us. So, wow, it's much appreciated. I'm sure you guys have 1,000,001 stories.
Oh, yeah.
And, there's many incidents. Well, I wouldn't say many, but there are a few incidents that have happened over the years, since I've been here for 8 years. But I'm sure there are a lot of ones that we don't know about.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And, I sort of want to ask you, like, how frequent are you guys called up? Like, how often do you go out in the middle of the night?
So, you know what?
If there's something suspicious or whatever.
So it's actually interesting. It really depends on the period. Like right now, and, I don't want to, like, knock on wood or anything like that. Yeah. It's actually been quite a while. Right. Thank God.
Right.
To the point of where we have new members of the team that I've seen it, like, training once.
Wow.
Versus the guys, let's say when I first started, 5+ years ago, and, like, yeah, there were times where it was almost nightly. Mm-hmm. Like when we had that celebratory barbecue that lower PHK had thrown for us.
Right.
After what happened, down below. And that was a crazy night in itself. You know, the terrorists hiding under the car.
Let's get into it. Let's go into a little bit of the story. So, I mean, I lived there. I lived on the street, and I'll tell you from my end what I experienced, and then maybe you could tell me what you know and what you saw. So, I think it was in the middle of the night or in the late hours of the evening. We got a text message that there's been some sort of infiltration. Before we know it, the place is crawling with army. The area where I lived at that point was connected to the access road behind the last row of houses on Piton Makatoret. And this is, I think, before Dagan was really built up.
Yeah.
And before Tamar was really built up. So we're now in the furthest, most northernmost neighborhood, closest to Bethlehem. And it's pitch dark. That access road is a beautiful area. I used to walk my dogs there all the time. I love it. It's, you know, there's someone, a suspicious person apparently who's infiltrated close to the yishuv. So we get that text message. We do all the typical things we would do then. We make sure that we're safe, our doors are locked, our chisim are down, and we wait for more news. I hear army coming in and out because, like as I was saying, we're on the access road, so the army's coming up from the road where they park, down the steps, through my backyard, to this access road, and they're back and forth and back and forth. You hear a lot going on. My dogs are barking like crazy. Man, sure. My dogs they didn't stop barking that night. I think, you know, it's one nice thing about having the dogs. The barking tends to be a lot because they bark all the time. You could almost be like they're crying wolf. But that night, I believe it was very helpful to us and for our safety. So apparently something was going on. Long story short, we find out that later in the morning, in the wee hours in the morning, the terrorist who had infiltrated was hiding in the bushes, not far from where my house was, behind one of my friend's houses. There were some soldiers in a Jeep waiting because apparently they knew that he had come from that direction. And he opened the door, tried to kill one of the soldiers. He wounded him, and then he was neutralized. So that's pretty much what we know. I mean, there's more to our experience, but tell us a little bit more what happened on your end of things.
So when you get that text message...
Oh, there was a drone too, and flares.
No, we didn't have
there was
a
giant flare that lit up the whole valley at one point. That was really cool.
And spoiler alert, it actually caused a fire afterwards in the forest, which happens with flares. So when you get that text message, at that point, we're probably already out for a good hour.
Right.
Because we're only going to send that once we feel and once we have an indication of an actual threat. Meaning we know that there's now somebody in Efrat. They had picked them up on the cameras. You know, Efrat, thank God, as much as we're, for the most part, a no-fence type of community, which I think is really cool. We have a phenomenal group of cameras and radars and different things that cover almost 360 of Efrat. And we've got the wonderful Shirlumi girls sitting in the Moked 24/7.
Moked's like the main office area where they have access to the first responders, you know, to direct them and to maybe contact with the army and information, get an information center, basically.
Yeah, so it's definitely like a command center. I mean, they've got like 8 different screens. They're able to watch everything.
I've seen it. I mean, and they give tours of it.
They do.
It would be really neat if anyone's interested. Take a look. It's a unique place.
Especially if you're a certain family member who really needs to make Aliyah, I'll personally arrange that tour for you. You know who I'm talking about.
Perfect.
So
that won't be the first. That won't be the last time we do this podcast.
Oh, definitely. Okay, we can keep doing that.
Yeah, we're going to keep doing that.
Big advocate of Aliyah. You need to make Aliyah. Everybody out there needs to make Aliyah.
Go ahead.
So they're already watching. They actually have one screen, which is really cool because on our radios that we all carry, in the antenna there's a GPS, and so they can actually see us and track us.
Oh wow!
And see us on a screen. I mean, we're a little dot, but they get to see us on the screen. So this guy had come in, and he was approaching. Now, thankfully, he saw us coming. And when you see mass amounts of army, I mean, we probably had a good 300 to 400 soldiers here. Because, like, at that point, when you have a absolute infiltration, which is what this was, everybody is coming in here, police and everything like that.
Just to timestamp this, this is what, 3 years ago, 4 years ago?
No, it's
already a while ago.
I think it was even closer to 4 years ago. It was quite a while ago.
Right.
And so we go out, we start looking. At that point, the Army's showing up, and then we kind of do like a buddy system, because the Army that comes in, these are random soldiers from anywhere in the country. What do they know about Efrat? I mean, these are guys who, when they're told to come in their Jeeps, they literally turn on Waze when they get into like the northern or southern entrances so that they know where to go. Like, that's how little they know Efrat. We on the emergency response team, on the other hand, we know Efrat like the back of our hand. Every nook and
cranny, right?
So we buddy up. So then each one of us is assigned a group of like 6 or 8 soldiers, and that's when you start going house to house, garden to garden, banging on the door, making sure that everybody's okay.
Right.
And ultimately, I mean, this terrorist, you got to give the guy props. He literally spent the night hiding under a car.
Right. And I mean, when he came in, it was under a car. Wow.
Yeah.
When he came in, it was probably like 10 or 11 o'clock at night, maybe a little bit later on.
Yeah, a little bit later. It was a bit closer to 12.
Yeah.
And
we got the all clear at like 7 a.m. or 7:30 a.m. Wow.
So now what's interesting is the fact that, we walked by him. I'm in a way sad to say this, but he was missed. I mean, after he got arrested, and the guy lived despite getting shot in the head, which is a crazy story. But when he reenacted, he said that one of the Army trackers, they were about 10 feet from him.
Wow.
And they didn't see him. And ultimately, we originally got the original all clear at about 5:30 in the morning, right? And it was just like, okay, the guy probably turned around, and that was it. And then one Jeep was left back. It was actually a reserve soldier unit, and unfortunately, the guy went to sleep. No judgment.
Yeah,
we've
he's
all
out
been
all
there,
night.
But he's been out all night.
Things are winding down. Got all clear.
The terrorist opens up the door of the Jeep and literally stabs him in the armpit. And then his driver, so they go tumbling out of the Jeep, and then the driver comes out of the Jeep, goes around, and now you got to take a careful shot because he's literally grappling with the officer. And ultimately, he ends up aiming and shooting him in the head, but the bullet only grazed his skull, and he survived.
Wow.
And now he's going to sit in an Israeli prison and get educated. That's something that, I don't get. So many families are just torn apart by terror attacks, and these guys then get to go to prison. They get many rights. They have cable TV. They get degrees, and then not to mention, meanwhile, back home, their families are being compensated. They're being paid. And they even have a pay
By
scheme.
who? Say by who?
They're paid by the Palestinian Authority, generally by the Hamas. This is funding that's sent in from different, Arab countries around the world. And there's a pay scale. The more people you injure or kill, the more money you're making. And, this is a guy who, think about it. He stabs a soldier. He's going to go to prison. He'll probably sit for, maybe 10, 15 years. He'll have the ability to walk out of prison essentially a millionaire with a master's degree. And that's crazy. That just, that to me is just wrong.
Right.
And that's something that, we need to do better.
Right.
Everybody wants to live and let live. I'm all for, living and let living. We we live really with the Arabs right here.
Well, I want to get into that more also, because we were talking about that, how the workers come in. Before I'll let you finish what you're saying. Yeah.
And I think, look, there's also nice stories. There's been times where, one Simchat Torah, we got called out. We were out all night because basically people heard a girl screaming. Yeah. And then the thought was that she was dragged out of Efrat and into one of the Arab villages. No. In instances like that, we actually call our neighbors in the local villages right behind us.
Right.
And they'll
remember this story.
They'll help us.
Yeah.
And they'll go out and then they'll do their own searches and everything like that. In the end, I mean, it was nothing. Apparently it was some girl who had fought with her, I don't know, her boyfriend or something. They never left the Efrat. But, this causes a lot of problem. I mean, I went at like 7:30 in the morning. Yeah. We were all assigned to go into the local shuls in our neighborhood.
Right. I remember
stop davening and go, if you have a teenage daughter at home, go home,
go check on her.
And I remember I walked into the big remonshel, and the chazan literally, who had a teenage daughter, literally stops davening as a chazan, and just goes, I'm out. I got to go home.
Listen, when you have teenagers, you need to check up on them.
Believe me, they say little kids, little problems, big kids, big problems. So it's interesting.
I'm not there yet. You'll have to give me some tips.
I'm there, my friend. Yeah. I've got, thank God, despite being 39 years old, I've got an 18-year-old daughter.
Wow, beautiful.
Doing Shirat Leumi and Shari Tzedek.
Wow.
And she's loving it, which is great. Super proud of her. And I got another daughter who's 16, and she's in 11th grade.
Yeah.
I've got my stepson, or my bonus son, as I should say.
Beautiful.
And he's in 9th grade.
It's a nice way to look at it.
It
bonus
is.
son.
Listen, they're bonus children.
Yeah.
If you look at it that way, it just makes everything easier.
Mm-hmm.
Look, it's not easy. Blending a family is never easy. I could write a book, but it's just very fulfilling.
It's so funny that the epitome of the vision of that is that I always think of the Brady Bunch, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, of course, it could be it's this beautiful thing, but it's still children, right? Kids are kids.
Kids are kids. Yeah. Siblings fight.
Yeah.
And apropos the Brady Bunch, we actually call ourselves the Blended Bunch.
Nice.
Because we're a blended family.
Beautiful.
And that's really awesome.
Let's rewind a little bit.
Let's go.
We got off on some awesome tangents. We were talking about how our Palestinian neighbors, the workers, the 500 plus workers, are now coming in to get vaccinated. These are basically workers, people who live in the towns next to us, and the idea is, first off, to give them the much needed vaccination that they need, and the fact is that they're coming into our town, and if most of the people here are protected and have some kind of the vaccination, the idea is that if there's some outside factor, that's also kind of that would kind of mess with things. So I think on one end it's a very good practical thing, and on the other end it's a very beautiful thing.
For sure.
You're talking about some good stories. There's one of the guys who, I don't know if he's from the family of Hebron that you were talking about, but this one older man, you know him. He walks all around the Efrat. He's one of the cleaners. He's always got a smile on his face. He's always saying hi to me. Sometimes I bring him out a Cafe Shachor. Nice. There's a serious language barrier there because I don't speak Arabic, and our Hebrew interaction is very limited, but it's a nice beautiful interaction. Also at the north entrance, I've been going to the mechanic up there for a while. Those guys have been great. They did a head gasket job on my first car for literally nothing, and it gave it brand new life, and it was amazing. I sat there the whole time chatting with them and hanging out with them. Good guys, right in the front, by the entrance of Efrat. A hardware store there has pretty much got everything you could possibly want and ever dream of needing when you want to do some work on your house. So the coexistence thing is a real thing. Absolutely. It's really happening. Obviously, you see a lot of the other end. The protection of our town and unfortunately some acts of terrorism and infiltration, but there is that good side, and I think that's a beautiful thing. Especially what's nice is in Efrat, you're really exposed to it. You're really came from America, and you only know what you know from watching the news and from for speaking with other people who have experiences, and to have years of firsthand experience living here in Gush Etzion is really a beautiful thing, because you really understand what status quo means, and you also understand when things are bad, when the weather's bad, I say, how to act and how to protect yourself. So what are the things that you think that people should be aware of, when they're out and about? Just in general, right now it seems to be a pretty calm period, which is really nice.
It's actually not. It's interesting that you say that. In the past few days, there have been multiple terror attacks. Some even here locally. 2 nights ago, some guys had come up with Molotov cocktails, and they were throwing it at the tunnel road, like right near the turnoff to Beitar.
Right. That's right outside of Jerusalem, basically. After Gilo.
Between us and Jerusalem. And you had a Palestinian woman walk into Chava Ephraim, the Ephraim farm that's in Binyamin, and she walked into a house, tried stabbing, the woman who lived there, and they were able to neutralize her. You had a soldier who was on a navigation up north, and 4 Arabs grabbed him.
Right.
And they ended up stealing his gun. Thank God they were all caught. He's okay, and everything's okay there. But there's been quite a few things going on. And thank God, look, a lot of this doesn't make the mainstream news. And that's really what's crazy, is that so much of this, you talk about, things that, you don't know about what we do here. That's on a national level. I mean, the army is working day and night, both, here in Israel and abroad, and 90% of it just you'll never hear about. But our soldiers and my hat absolutely goes off to every soldier in active duty or in reserve duty like myself, and it's just incredible, and my hat really goes off to them, and they keep us safe. I love on Shabbat, when you go to shul and you say the prayer for the soldiers. I think that's huge. I think that's a prayer that needs to be said in any shul anywhere in the world.
Sure.
And I think that's beautiful. And look, you got to be, in general, you got to just be, you got to be aware of your surroundings. And that's really what it is that you got to know who's around you, whether you're standing at a bus stop, walking down the street. You just want to be aware of what's going on. And what's interesting is that if you look at most of the terror attacks that have happened here in Israel, about 70 to 80% of them are actually, the terrorist is actually neutralized by a civilian.
Right.
Especially when you're talking about like in a city, it's very rare that it's either, a policeman or a soldier. It's usually some armed civilian, kind of, I guess, right place, right time type of scenario, and off you go. Right. And you got to be ready at any time. That's, to me, it's such muscle memory at this point of where, when it's go time, you go. You do what is against human nature. You run towards danger as opposed to running away from it. I actually had a story. This is even before I joined the Kitat Konenut. So one night I'm driving home from work, and this is pre-COVID days where you're going to actually stop at the hitchhiking post and let a random stranger into your car.
Okay.
And so I stopped. This is in Gilo, right? Right at the corner of Jerusalem, and 2 people get in my car. So in the front seat next to me, some, teenage kid gets in. And then literally as I'm about to drive off, this guy comes from the back of the car, back of the crowd. He's wearing a black velvet kippah that looks as real as, I don't know. Like, it clearly didn't...
Off the set of a
movie, right, of a bad movie, right? Yeah. And he's wearing, like, this bigger jacket, and his hands are just stuffed in his pockets.
Right, that's odd.
And so, for sure. And so he gets in my car, and I'm like, okay, something's happening right now. And so I identify that something's off. So I turn around to the guy, and at this point, I'm not armed. All right, I'm not yet. I don't have my guns that I have today. And so it's just me and this dude. And so I turn around, and I said, where are you from? So in a very Arabic-sounding accent, he goes, Hebron, Drom Har Hebron. I'm like, okay, here we go. So meanwhile, a teenage kid's sitting in front, and he's just like watching this going on. He's like, I'm out. And he gets out of the car.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
He's like, I'm not playing. I'm out. So he gets out of the car.
Smart kid.
Very smart kid, and absolutely the right thing to do. And anybody who finds himself in that situation, if you're not trained or able to, assist in the situation, go get somewhere safe. And so I turn around at him at this point, and I'm being very aggressive with him, because something that they don't do well with is somebody being aggressive with them.
Confrontation.
Yeah. I'll tell you a story about actually a terrorist attack that happened in Efrat, of where things did not end well for the terrorist, because the guy he stabbed went after him, which was very cool. So I'm looking at this guy, and I'm like, give me your ID. And he goes, why? I said, give me your ID right now. So at this point, he's like debating what I do, and the guy gets out of my car and takes off. So I call the police at that point, and then they went to search for him. But like, I just posted this on Facebook afterwards, and again, as a public service announcement, nothing more than that. And people are like, "Oh my God, you need to say Hagomel now," and everything like that. I'm just thinking to myself, like, I don't know. To me, I didn't really feel in danger. I just felt prepared and ready. And yeah, if I needed to grapple with this guy or whatever it was, or if he was going to pull out a knife, like I'm running these scenarios in my head all the time.
Just to explain, like someone who's coming from that area and you're going towards Jerusalem, it could be a very dangerous scenario. Sitting in your car, that means you could get him across a checkpoint. That means he can have access to your city, access to your town, that he normally wouldn't have access to. And, I mean, there's no good reason for him necessarily be getting into your car.
No, absolutely not. And it was, look, I can't tell you at the end of the day what his intentions were.
Yeah.
I can't tell you if his plan was to, do recon, try to see, okay, is this an effective way to get myself into Efrat or into another, neighborhood or city? It could be many different things. Something that I don't think the terror groups get enough credit for is they're very, very smart. They will do their recon. They will go ahead and they'll scout out a location first. They put a lot of work. They work in cells, and there's a lot of, brainwashing and manipulation over there. They prey on, let's say, if I'm a teenage Palestinian boy, I'm 17 years old, maybe my dad's out of the picture, and, I'm now providing for my family, and somebody comes over to me and, brings me into the mosque and, makes me feel welcomed, and then starts telling me about how you want to be a hero, you want to be a martyr. You go and do this, your family will be taken care of the rest of your life. You get to sit up, next to Allah, 72 virgins, all the fun things that they supposedly, get. And they're like, okay, I'm going to do this. And the crazy thing is that there's always a fail-safe for them. And what I mean by that is, thankfully this isn't this common anymore, but, I've lived in Israel since 91. I made Aliyah when I was 9. And I've unfortunately seen countless, and I mean countless terror attacks. I've had friends injured. I've had friends killed. And, every time it seemed to get closer and closer. But bus bombings were super common.
Right.
And it wasn't just, bus bombings. It was bombs everywhere. Some of these things are not even known to the public. For example, the Sparrow bombing, which was absolutely tragic. The terrorist had the bomb in a guitar.
Was it 99? I
think so.
Yeah.
And he had the bomb was in a guitar. And he actually had long hair. He bleached it blonde so he wouldn't stand out in the crowd. The double bombing in the Machne Yehuda Shuk, the bombs were in watermelons. The Dolphinarium attack, the guy went and stood in a crowd of teenagers, and he had a drum, and it was in the drum.
Wow.
So they get creative, they add, whether it's, nuts and bolts, these little like metal pellets to make it just that more lethal and the radius, be that much worse. And any one of these bombers, there's always a guy watching him with a remote detonator. So that way, if the guy chickens out and won't do it, the guy who's watching him will detonate him. So there's no chickening out at the last moment. There's no remorse or regret. And the thing is, some of them do. Some of them get to that point, and it's now, it's go time, and they just don't do it.
What happened that time in Efrat, where the terrorist was where there was confrontation and it didn't go well? You were talking about that before.
Right, correct. So it's, this is, I remember this very, very clearly. So it's Friday night.
Yeah.
I'm sitting down to have my Shabbat meal with my family. I'm literally like cutting into the chicken. I haven't even taken a bite yet.
Okay.
My radio goes off, and it's like, okay, active live terror attack here in Efrat. So go time, I leave my wife, leave my kids, and off I go. And what happened was there was a couple walking here in Efrat. And the guy usually is always armed. He says, to this moment, I don't know why I didn't have my gun on me. So they went for a pre-Friday night meal walk.
I remember this incident too.
And so he's walking with his wife, and all of a sudden he feels these like 4 whacks on his back. He said originally that he had thought that it was just a buddy going, hey dude, what's up? And like clapping him on the back.
Yeah.
His wife looks and sees that there's a terrorist standing behind him with a knife, and he stabbed him 4 times, 3 in the back, 1 in the neck. So she starts screaming. Now, most people in this point, they're going to go down, they're going to panic. This guy, what a man. He turns around, shoves the terrorist with his hands, puts up his fist, like old school, like, put up your dukes, man. He puts up his fist and goes, go, let's go. And so they're standing about maybe, social distancing, right, before it was a thing. They're about 6 feet apart. The terrorist has the knife up. He's going, Allahu Akbar. And meanwhile, the guy who lives here is sitting there with his arms up going, let's go, come on, let's go. And so at this point, what's going through the guy's head is, wait a minute, this isn't how it's supposed to be.
Right, I just stabbed him.
I stabbed him 4 times.
4 times.
Why is he not down?
Wow.
Why is he not bleeding out? Like, why is he fighting with me? And the second he realized that, he took off and he ran away.
Mm-hmm.
And he ran away. There was a car waiting for him in one of the local villages. And, here, we always get our man. Sometimes it takes a few weeks, a few days, sometimes a few years. But they always get their man. And they did. It took them 2 years to actually track him down and be able to find him. But they found the guy. But it's in scenarios like that where if you're vigilant enough and you fight them off, they don't know what to do. They don't know how to handle that situation. There was actually a few weeks ago, there was a guy from Tapua, that's up in northern Shomron.
Right.
And he's standing at the Trempiata, at the hitchhiking post, and he's waiting to just, get a ride. And this guy walks up to him and tries stabbing him. And at that point, kippah in hand, his, payas are flying everywhere. And he's just like kicking the guy. And he was able to get away because of that. And when you show, like, the best thing you could possibly do is just show no fear. Scream, yell, like, be aggressive. That will throw them off.
This is obviously if you're in harm's way.
God forbid.
And you're right there in the thick of it. Obviously, if you could get to safety, you do that. But if someone's right in front of you, attacking you, you say the best thing to do is to, whatever aggressive, however they're coming at you, double that.
Oh, yeah. You got to be more aggressive. It'll deter them. It'll scare them off. Look, first things first, unless you're armed or trained or know what you're doing, if you can get away, run. It's super important. Let people who know what to do, they'll take care of it. If, however, you're trained or, know how to protect yourself or everything like that, if you can stop what's going on, and whether it's, to protect yourself or protect, the many bystanders that are around you, you want to go ahead and do that. And that's super important.
Wow.
Now, I do need to cut over to your sister for a moment. I just want to say this, though. I know we're talking a lot about terror attacks and everything like that, but there isn't a more safe country, especially in this day and age with anti-Semitism flying absolutely everywhere. A player on the Miami Heat, just, he's live on Twitch, throws out some anti-Semitic racial slur. Yeah. And, that's happening now, 2021, on, a professional athlete. And he, of course, issued an apology, and I didn't know, and I'm going to get educated. I'm going to educate myself. Yada, yada, yada. Sure. But the point is that there isn't a more safe place. I feel fully ready and willing for my kids to walk around, hang out with friends, and there is no place safer than living in Israel. So make Aliyah.
This is a good segue, because you mentioned earlier that you came in the 90s, 91.
Yeah.
You were 9 years old then?
I was.
And what was that like? Your family made Aliyah all together?
Yeah, we did. It's funny. People ask me sometimes.
Where'd you come from?
So I came from Toronto, Canada. Yeah. And what's funny is, in this day and age of
you're not even American? You're Canadian?
Well, before you go and knock on us more superior people from Canada, I am actually an American citizen as well. Okay. I am a tri-citizen.
Wow.
Yeah, killer on taxes, but I'm a tri-citizen.
You're actually able to hold 3 passports.
I do hold 3 passports.
Wow.
American, Canadian, and Israeli.
I wonder if there's another scenario where you could tack on another 1 or 2 passports there.
I probably could.
That's really interesting. I didn't know you could.
Now they're offering passports to, like, if you're like trace your ancestors back to Portugal, you can become a
from the time of the Inquisition or
That's
whatever.
right. So you can go ahead and do that. But it's funny that people ask me, they do the math. They're like, "Oh, so you made Aliyah in 91 as a 9-year-old?" And for some reason, the follow-up question to that is always, did you make Aliyah with your family? So when I'm in a sarcastic mood, which is more often
I was
than not,
9 years old, bro. What do you expect?
No. So I look people, in the eye, and I'm like, I say to them, I'm like,
when you were 9 years old.
So no, I'm like, I was a very precocious 9-year-old. Yeah, I did make Aliyah myself. And they look at me and they're like, really? I'm like, no, I definitely did not make Aliyah.
I think the question there is, it's kind of like it's like an unspoken thing. Did you make Aliyah when you were 9 years old by choice with your family? Meaning, right, you're 9 years old and your family makes Aliyah, right? So is this something that you wanted to do? Is this something that you just kind of had to go along with it?
So I kind of, look, I love that I'm here. I'm so happy that it happened. Yeah. But no, as a 9-year-old, you're not
leaving all your friends.
Yeah, you're leaving everything behind.
You're leaving your precious Canada.
That's right. Hey, Toronto's a beautiful place.
Okay.
And no, you're not asked.
Yeah.
As a 9-year-old, it's kind of like, this is the family decision. This is what we're doing, and off you go.
Right.
And the whole Aliyah process, went very quickly. This is, of course, way before the days of
nefesh
b'nefesh.
Yeah.
I remember my dad, in his broken Hebrew, we went down to Misrad Klita, because they hadn't transferred, the Sal Klita money, which today is just a direct deposit into your bank account. And he's yelling at them in broken Hebrew. And it was just a disaster. So it's funny that you ask, because, when I made Aliyah, so this is where I felt gypped by the system.
Okay.
Because, I'm learning, in Nitivat Torah, Jewish day school. And in my books...
This is in Toronto.
And I'm learning in my books, like, Tu B'Shvat comes, and the weather's nice, and, Pesach comes, Aviv Yigia Pesach ba, spring's here, and everything like that. So here in my head, I'm like, I'm coming from Canada, where it snows like 20, like 28 days out of 30 days a month in the winter.
Sure.
And... here I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to make Aliyah, spring's going to come along, winter's going to be a joke, and off we go. So the winter before I made Aliyah, the winter of 91, it rained a total of 3 times the entire winter. The country was in a horrible drought. My luck in the winter of 92 was the year of the multiple blizzards.
I remember that. That was crazy. The Northeast got hit so hard.
So you think the Northeast got hit? Yeah. Israel got hit. It was like the worst winter that Israel had seen in 140 years. It was that bad. All my friends are like, "What did you bring with you from Canada?" Like, so why? and so I was like, whoa. This is not what I was being sold in school.
Right.
This is not, here, Tu B'Shvat here.
We're supposed to be going to the better weather.
Exactly. And it's like, how did I go from literally it was like, if I was expecting the spring, we had, sent our stuff on the lift, and this was, 30 years ago almost. So lifts took a lot longer. Mm-hmm. Getting it out of customs took a lot longer. So, this snow had hit and our winter coats hadn't even come yet.
Wow.
So that was, crazy.
Where did you guys move to?
So we made Aliyah to the absorption center in Kfar Dumim.
Oh, wow.
And, it's crazy. You go from living, in a house.
That's like outside Ma'ale Adumim, north of Yerushalayim, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, south of Jerusalem. We're on the... No, correct. Sorry. North of Jerusalem. You're right. It was a much smaller yeshuv than it is today.
And that really is more desert. Like that's really much more desert than even where we are right now.
It was super desert, and I remember just getting off the plane,
oh my gosh.
And we go to our caravan. Now imagine you're coming from Canada. We lived in a house, not a big one, but you live in a house, and now you're living in a caravan, and that was just crazy.
Yeah.
To go the culture shock. I guess you don't really get this, I guess, as a 9-year-old, but the culture shock you go through, and it's like, where am I?
Mm-hmm.
And, I have all of, one other English-speaking kid in my grade, and we ended up fighting very early on in the year. So
when did things get better?
So, I don't know, as a kid, as a 9-year-old, you kind of just adapt. You just want to do, I was able, luckily, to learn the language very quickly. I do thank the fact that I got into a fight with that kid who spoke English. I thank him in a way because I was forced with the decision of either learn Hebrew or don't have friends. And I'm a very social guy. So I learned Hebrew very quickly. I picked up quicker than any of my siblings, older or younger.
Right.
And I learned Hebrew that way. So I thought that was, I guess, hindsight 2020, everything's better in, perspective. But that helped me learn Hebrew very quickly.
Do you feel like that aspect of learning Hebrew, that experience, that choice you made, the toiling to learn it, do you think that helped build character for you in a way where if you had stayed in Toronto, maybe, things would have been a little bit easier and perhaps you'd maybe would have turned out a little bit different? Just talking about that one aspect of kind of like roughing through it, learning that language,
Oh, I mean, I think, I think it goes deeper than just the language. But yeah, there's no question that the trajectory of what, my teenage years would have looked like in Toronto, and ultimately what my friends who, kind of stayed there and what their teenagehood looked like.
Yeah.
Versus, growing up here. And yeah, you take the average Israeli 18-year-old, the average American, Canadian, Anglo 18-year-old, and they're just in different worlds. I mean, think of the fact that, I'm an 18-year-old from, Canada, the U.S., wherever, and now I'm coming to Israel for my, year of,
your year off.
My year off, my
everything.
year of independence,
Sure.
and like, your parents are not there, and you get into the
your
crazy
year
things
to learn Torah and connect to the land.
Okay, yeah, that's definitely what's happening, and yeah, definitely. And so, versus, here at 18, you're generally, going into the army, and then all of a sudden, you find yourself in scenarios that you would have never imagined. I mean, I remember when I was just 4 months in the army. I just finished basic training, and it's Rosh Hashanah night, 2000. I'll never forget this. And I'm sitting, on a Jeep on the Jordanian-Israel border, and I really feel like, what am I doing here? I'm just guarding the flies and everything like that. And one of the Bedouin trackers who had, been in Lebanon and everything, he looks at me and he's like, Ari? He's like, shh. He's like, do not say things. You don't know what you're opening up. You don't know the Pandora's box you're going to open up. And lo and behold, he could not have been more right. The very next day is when the Third Intifada started.
Oh, Lord.
And I found myself, I'd been off duty, but I was on call, and we get called up, and basically another little army base in the area, there were terrorists surrounding it. They had lit the field on fire around it. They're throwing glass bottles and stones and everything. And the people on this little, base, they were kind of, they weren't combat soldiers. They don't really know how to protect themselves. So we show up. There's a, border police, Jeep there as well. And we're standing behind this concrete wall, and there's glass and rocks and everything just raining down on us. And, my commander gave the shoot to kill order because, we didn't even have, now you have, after that we got prepared with all the anti-riot gear, rubber bullets, tear gas, flashbang grenades.
Didn't know what it meant, really.
But yeah, it was like, and I'm 4 months in the army at this time. And like he basically said, if they cross the wall, which means at this point they were in the base.
This is the late '90s, Second Intifada time, right?
No, this is Third Intifada. This is when Ariel Sharon had famously gone up to Har HaBayit,
right? And
that incited everything. I mean, whatever, they were looking for an excuse, right? Anything incites them, and all of a sudden, and that launched all those terror
and this
attacks.
Is when you're in the army.
Yeah, and this is when I'm, in the army.
Doing
this
your
launched
service,
the, Oslo Accords and everything like that.
Course.
And it's just crazy how from that moment on, just the turning point of my army career, where, you're going, the way it works is you're supposed to do 4 months active duty, 4 months training. And that's how you kind of go through your army service. And it's like every single training got either canceled or, got really shrunk down into like 6 weeks because you just needed to be on active duty.
Oh, wow.
There was such a need. The Army actually opened up an entire separate battalion called it's now called the Kfir Brigade. And that's, that was born from that need because you had your standard, you had Nachal and Tzanchanim, the paratroopers, Golani, Givati, and they were very good at, dealing with the different areas. Hebron, Lebanon, Gaza.
Sure.
But your day-to-day run-of-the-mill is, okay, we're now here in Beit Lechem and Jenin and Shechem and all those different places. And the Army wasn't built or set up that way for that urban fighting, which is very different. You can't apply the rules of warfare, whether you're just like running up the hill here, in a forest, versus when you're going house to house, and how you need to go about that. And, the Army, designed, built, purchased, many different weapons to kind of combat that. And so they actually made an entire new brigade that their specialty is working within Israel in the quote-unquote West Bank. And that's kind of how that spawned, and it all happened then.
Wow.
You even had,
was there like a retraining for you guys on active duty?
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
It was on the fly kind of thing?
You had, look,
yeah.
In times like that, it's like you got to learn stuff on the fly. Things that you weren't used to doing,
right.
like you got to do. I mean,
all of a sudden there's new protocols, and
yeah.
This is how things are happening. This is what we need to do.
Absolutely,
this is our new way of acting in any given situation.
For sure. I mean, you got to learn. When you're in urban combat, you've got civilians. You've got, what they used to do is, you just stick your hand out the window with like an AK-47, and you just spray bullets that way. And it was very difficult, even for the snipers, to take these guys out because they're just sticking their arm out. So, Israel, we're a very smart country. So we went off and got the Barrett. Now, the Barrett is classically a hunting rifle. Don't ask me why you would need to possibly shoot anything with a 50 caliber bullet. But,
right.
You're talking about something that's effective at
very powerful.
2,000 yards. The bullets are like this big.
I was in Vegas a couple years ago. We went to a range, and they're like, "You want to shoot the big one?" Like, all right, America, let's do it.
America, yeah.
One shot with that thing, man. Right, and it was like on a tripod.
Of course.
I had it butted up against my shoulder. One shot had a little bruise on my shoulder. I felt that kickback. But wow, holy cow, is that thing powerful.
Oh, yeah.
Unreal.
And we made it more lethal here in Israel.
Yeah.
So, it's a very strong gun, bullet in general. We made a specially designed bullet with an explosive head. This thing can go through...
It's like a mini bunker buster.
Yeah, it is. It can go through a meter, which is 3.3 feet of reinforced concrete.
Wow.
Those like square concrete blocks you see like at roadblocks or whatever? It can go through one of those.
That's unreal.
So what the Army started doing is, terrorist sticks his hand out the window with his AK, you shoot him through the wall. And that's what they did.
Wow.
And that became a deterrent.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it's crazy about how you don't think of these things when you're in the moment. Like I remember when I was stationed, in Psagot, right outside Ramallah.
Oh, wow. You were in Psagot.
Oh, yeah. And they would fire. This was at the heydays of where, they're firing, into Psagot, like, nonstop, daily, day and night. And like I remember there were times where like, I'm sleeping, they start shooting, you just roll out of bed, grab your gun, you're not even getting dressed,
right?
And you're just going out there and you're getting into a legit firefight with them.
Wow.
And I was a sharpshooter, so I had my special post that I would go into and everything.
Did you have that 50 cal?
No, okay. I wish I got to shoot it, but no, I wish I had gone and done the Barrett training. That's a whole different course in its own right.
Sure.
And, it's just a crazy reality to live in. And it's like at the time, like you're just so pumped full of adrenaline and, you're in a firefight. And then afterwards, after like, the shooting stops and you look behind you and there's bullet holes about let's say 6 inches above your head.
Unreal.
And it's like at the time, you're just like,
you had no idea what was happening. Yeah, the adrenaline's pumping. Yeah.
And then you see that and you're like, whoa,
wow, I literally just dodged a bullet.
Yeah, literally, yes.
Yeah.
And, this could have ended very, very differently.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's like, and you don't even think about it at the time. And that's the truth, is that it just kind of, you just act. And that's, I learned something from one of my officers very early on. Really smart guy. He's actually a pediatric doctor today in Hadassah. Incidentally, he was, talking about going full circle. When my youngest, Adva, was born 4.5 years ago, the doctor who came to check her out before she was released from the hospital was my officer from the Army.
Unreal.
So, yeah. That
nice
went
little reunion.
Oh, yeah. That went full circle, which is really cool.
That's beautiful.
So I'm in basic training, and we're sitting in a classroom setting, and he goes, all right, 10 seconds, everybody get up on your chairs. So, no, listen, your officer says get up on the chair.
Get up on your chair.
You get up on your chair.
Right.
You don't want to get punished afterwards. And so he tells us, he goes, I bet you're all looking at me like I'm crazy right now. And we're kind of, we're not going to say anything bad, we don't get punished. But he's like, what about if I told you that only I identified that a gas bomb had been thrown into the room, but it was only lethal up to half a foot off the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd have saved all of your lives.
Mm-hmm.
What about that? And we're like, oh, okay. That makes sense. And he's like, that's the level of training that I need to get you guys to.
Mm-hmm.
So that way, when now we're at a situation of where, you're in a firefight and it's time to get up, the charge order has been given. You got to go. You got to get up. And they really kind of beat that into your head, sometimes even physically.
Yeah.
They beat that into you so that when it's go time and when you got to get up and charge, which is basically I'm laying now under cover and, the threat's up there.
And there's bullets flying.
Yeah, and I'm going to get up.
You don't want to go that way.
And off I go.
Right.
And that's the level and point that they get you to.
Wow.
Which is, crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I think, in this day and age, though, and, this is a little sad for me to see because our soldiers, their hands are tied. And, you just see, because what's happening is that a lot of the, and they're justified shootings, soldiers, civilians are getting into trouble.
Right.
And it's coming to the point of where, in some cases, soldiers are afraid to shoot.
Hesitant.
They're hesitant.
Act.
And we can't have that. We can't have a scenario where our soldiers are now in danger. Their lives are in danger.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just going off and they're afraid to pull the trigger when needed. And that's a bad scenario.
Right.
That needs to change, 100%.
Right. Well, we're changing all the time.
True.
We're making those changes on the fly, like you back when you were in the Army. So hopefully, with God's help, that'll happen. Wow, Ari, an hour just flew by.
Well, that was an hour?
I just took a peek. An hour just flew by. I'd love to chat with you a little bit more. Maybe I'm just gonna hit you with one or two more questions.
Yeah, go for it.
Aliyah, moving to Israel. So, 9 years old, you come, you acclimate. What do you think became like one of the things that you loved about the land? Like, just kind of like pick one thing. One of the things compared to like your previous life that kind of like made it nice, like a bonus being here.
I would say it would definitely be the fact that there is our history everywhere. I remember a lot of the highways that we have today didn't exist. And it was like every other day that during the course of like excavating some sort of road or building site, and, they were finding whether it was, antiques or bones. And these are things dating back thousands of years.
Yeah, it's pretty neat.
And it was like, I'm sitting here thinking to myself, like, this is not something you'd ever get in Canada or in the U.S.
Right.
It's literally our history.
Also the connection that you have to those things.
So I have a deep love from the land. There's nowhere in the world that I would live. As much as, life is difficult here sometimes, there is nowhere else in the world that I would rather live than here. And I've just always had this deep connection with, the country and being here. And then, being in the Army and, being out there, in the pouring rain or in very uncomfortable situations, but knowing, people can sleep better at night because I'm standing out here. That is something I'm absolutely willing to do. So that's, I would say one thing is just the history everywhere.
Kol hakavod. I envy that part. The fact that you got to do your service and the way you look at that, it's mamash beautiful. One last question. Why Efrat? When did you come here and why?
All right, so why Efrat? So
why did you stay?
So about
3 questions.
There you go. All right. Why did I come? So I moved to Efrat almost 13 years ago.
Yeah.
I knew a bunch of people at the time, and I was looking for, a younger...
Got a whole chevra here.
Yeah, look at that.
Nice.
I had a younger, I was looking for a younger community, Anglo, Chevra, and everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And somewhere where, like same type people like myself, young parents, just kind of want to work hard and then, during the weekends enjoy themselves, kiddish club, playing basketball, watching football.
You do sound like the American guy.
Yeah, right?
Okay.
And it's funny because, people don't believe me when I say that I've been here for as long as I have.
Yeah, it was a shocker for me, to be honest. I didn't know that. And it's you have that Anglo I don't know, vibe, that experience. But you're practically a Sabra here.
No, I am. But the funny thing is that I still have an Anglo accent on my Hebrew.
Yeah.
Which is
that's
crazy.
great.
Even though I came here as a 9-year-old, people to be like, oh, so how long ago did you make Aliyah? And they're expecting the answer to be like, 3 to 5 years. I'm like, oh, I've been here for almost 30 years now. And they're like, what?
Wow.
So why Efrat? Getting back to
that.
So I had a bunch of friends here. Moved out here. Why stay? I mean, why not stay?
Yeah.
I mean, look at this place. It's beautiful. We win awards all the time for the beauty of, how clean and how organized everything is. The schools here, top to bottom, from nursery all the way through high school, boys and girls are incredible. Our schools win awards all the time for how good they are. And, we're so close to Jerusalem and, just it's beautiful here. So why not? I love living in the Rimon. The Rimon gets a bad rap. It's like, oh, only old people live in the Rimon.
Well, it's the OGs, whatever.
Right. Well, so, what? I'm
actually really happy. I have someone representing the Rimon.
Yeah.
I think I maybe have had one other couple on from that side of town. So it's really important. I've had mostly northern neighborhoods people here. So it's good to have people from the south.
And happy to represent. And, it's so funny because, even the older people, these guys are the coolest people you ever met. These are guys when I'm a huge sports guy, and these are guys who got to see some of the greatest players name a sport, and these are legends in our mind, and they saw them play in person. And I think that's really cool.
That is cool.
I've never heard such foul language in a show before. Prior to going to daven with these guys. And they're just so funny and so cool and live and let live. And we actually have a nice young chevra going on there. And, I love it. And
I really believe that as the northern neighborhoods fill in more and more, which is happening after everything's being built, that younger couples will start coming back to this side of town because there'll be more affordable housing. And plus, these neighborhoods are really established already. They have all this foliage and these trees and the shade and the infrastructure, good parks and ganim. So I think in the next few years, I really believe that more younger families, I don't know, what do you call a young family? I don't know.
I guess, late 20s, early 30s.
Yeah, I have a feeling that they'll be coming back to the southern neighborhoods.
Well, they will be. And by the way,
I'm sure they are.
And they are already. And it's funny because where we're sitting in this very spot, they're actually building a new project right here. It's going to have 32 units, size unknown. There's a lot of, different opinions on what the project's going to be. And like any project in Israel, the idea and the design is going to change about 80 times between now and when they finally start building. But, that to me is amazing, and what I love about the Rimon and this side of Efrat in general is it feels like a yeshuv. You go into Zayed, and again, no knock on Zayed, but it's like Har Nof. It's a concrete jungle. It's there's so many buildings everywhere. And here it's like you walk around on Shabbat and there's so many trees.
It's a nice neighborhood.
And it's
little
quiet.
Neighborhood, yeah.
And I love that. I work very hard, and it's nice to know that, downtime is just quiet. I'm on my corner. And I love that.
Yeah, beautiful. All right, we're going to have to do this again. There's so much more I need to learn about you.
I'd love to do this again.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
It's wishing you a great week. And
you as well.
If you like this podcast, please subscribe to YouTube and any podcast platform that you are subscribed to because we're there everywhere, basically. So thank you so much and have a great day.
And make sure to leave a nice 5-star review for my man over here. And one last shout out, make Aliyah.
L'chaim.